This week on the show, Discord basically hits the self-destruct button on their entire company. I've been using the MCON mobile controller for about 5 months now, and I have some long-term impressions and thoughts. The creator of The Binding of Isaac has a new video game out, which I've been playing, and Yakuza, of all franchises, becomes kind of the poster child for worst way to do a remake. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Wavelengths. It's video game news for the rest of us. I'm your host, Brendan Bigley. Today is Friday, February 13th. It's Friday the 13th. Just be aware. If you're superstitious, be aware. You know, don't walk under a ladder. Don't break a mirror. Pet a black cat if you see one, though, because they need love. Don't avoid them. Don't avoid black cats. I got to start today with the news story that I really can't stop thinking about, mainly because, honestly, it just kind of affects, like, my life and what I do. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I really don't know what the answer is yet. I'm still thinking about it. But the main story this week that is really hitting me is this Discord ID verification check that they're rolling out. So if you don't know anything about this, we'll back up a little bit. There have been a bunch of pressures being put upon companies recently, mostly by regulatory bodies saying, like, hey, you need better ways of verifying, you know, who is an adult and who is not an adult on your platform where there are people of all different ages chatting with one another. And this has mainly been under the pretense of we're doing this to, like, you know, protect the children, quote unquote. The way that a lot of these companies have started doing this is by saying that if you are on our platform, you are by default a child until you can provide some way of proving that you are not a child. You probably saw a lot of videos and photos and news stories about different platforms rolling these kinds of checks out with things like facial scanning and whatever, and people scanning in the face of Sam Porter Bridges from Death Stranding. That obviously didn't work super well, but was just a way that people were getting around it. And people will always find their way around these things. It's worth mentioning. But for now, at least, Discord seems like they really want to do this. This is not the first time they've done this. And this is the first umbrage that I take with this. Discord, what they are saying is that everyone who uses Discord is going to be lumped into basically a teenager account mode, which means that you will be unable to access certain channels and servers and features that most people would be able to access right now on Discord, unless you can prove some kind of verification of your age. They did this a couple months ago. They did this in a couple regions specifically, and almost immediately, in October of last year, this is just a couple months ago, they leaked, I think it was 70,000 pieces of identification of their users out onto the internet, including some photos of government-issued IDs. Now, this was technically not Discord, I guess. This was the service that Discord was using for age verification, which they no longer use. But still, just recently, there was a major breach where a bunch of people's identification was leaked because of exactly the thing that Discord is now asking everybody worldwide to do. People did not take that very well, me included. I don't feel very good about this. And I think it's worth mentioning at the top because, you know, this is a podcast called Wavelengths. It's a project called Wavelengths. It is one of many podcasts or projects in a network of podcasts and projects called The Worst Garbage Online. And we have a Discord that we've been running for, oh my God, it's been a long time now, since like 2019, probably, I want to say. Maybe even late 2018. It's been a long time. We've been running it for a while. It has, I think, thousands of people in it at this point. It is, in my opinion, one of the like greatest salves of the internet that I've ever been able to experience. Just a bunch of people who are like nice and welcoming and cool. I cherish it deeply and have always kind of had in the back of my head that this community is being built on the back of a service that could go south at any moment. It's a thing I think about all the time with basically every service that I use. I think about it with YouTube. I think about it with different podcasting platforms. I think about it with Patreon in particular. You know, Patreon is kind of the backbone of the creator economy right now. And Patreon is also a company that seems to be making like I would say like anti-creator decisions over and over and over again, including a recent one where they're now going to be basically increasing the cut that they take in response to some stuff that Apple's doing. It's a whole thing. I don't have to get into the Patreon of it all, but like I'm watching all of these platforms kind of nosedive one by one, and you have to think to yourself, and I've been thinking to myself for a little while recently, like, when is this going to happen to Discord, and what do you do in the event that that happens? So here we are now presented with this situation where I don't want to upload my government-issued identification to Discord. I'm not very interested in doing that. But as the founder of the server, like I'm the admin on this server, I will have to do that, because it's worth mentioning. Discord has said time and time again over the past basically 48 hours as of this recording that the reason that they're doing this is, again, to like protect children. But if you have a teen account, which everyone will at first, you still get access to most features on Discord with certain exceptions. Some of those being like certain moderation tools, it sounds like, at least based on their very loose wording that they have right now. You need to be an adult to access age-restricted experiences such as age-restricted servers and channels, or to modify certain safety settings. And I imagine that last bit will really come into play for people like me who are like the admin of a server like this. A lot of people have started Googling and searching for like, what are alternatives? Which it's even funny to say Googling in this case, because like people already feel this way about Google. People are DuckDuckGoing alternatives to Discord. The kind of sad state of affairs right now is that there isn't an obvious answer outside of some really interesting ones that are nascent, I would say, and also probably unreliable. Like there's one called Stoat, S-T-O-A-T, which is just an animal. It was an app that I think was called Revolt, which is a horrible name, and I'm glad they changed it. But now it's called Stoat. And Stoat is another centralized platform where the same thing could happen. You know, like eventually Stoat could make the same decisions down the line. And it might take, 5 to 6 to 8 years for them to build up critical mass and then need to do this based on whatever. But, essentially it's kind of like moving from Twitter to Threads at the end of the day, going from Discord to Stoat. It's like, is leaving Twitter to go to another platform that's basically the same and also owned by people who are like fallible a possibility? Like I don't know if that's the move. They have said over at Stoat that they're like cool and will be totally fine. And the one thing that I do think is in their favor is that you can actually run your own Stoat instance. Like if you wanted to, you can download and install like on your own device, run a Stoat server yourself without being like linked to Stoat's platform or running it off of their own servers. Like you could have your own self-hosted version of this, which I think is probably the best answer, like a more decentralized version of this. And actually Twitter's a great product to bring up in this case, because I've said before, for a long time, Twitter was my favorite thing on the internet. I started using it, I think, at the end of 2007 or the beginning of 2008. It was me and one friend in high school were the only people I knew who had it, and we were basically just like tweeting at each other instead of texting each other. And from that point on, I was like a Twitter diehard for years and years and years and years, until obviously the Elon Musk take over, where I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be on a platform that is also, first of all, filled with and like almost celebrating Nazis on it. And then obviously just getting worse and worse and worse over time, which it was. It just felt like not the move. So I bailed, and I felt a couple different ways about the many alternatives. There were a lot of different alternatives that popped up around Twitter when Twitter was like really failing and a lot of people wanted to leave Twitter. And those alternatives mostly were kind of the same product with potentially the same problems down the line. The same problem that we're seeing here with Discord and the Discord alternatives is the same kind of problem that we can see potentially popping up in a lot of these Twitter clones. Everyone settled on a couple different ones, right? The people who still wanted that like short form burst of text kind of social media platform, they landed on Threads, they landed on Blue Sky, and that was basically it. Those are like the two platforms people really cared about. Nobody landed on Mastodon. And I will always have like a little piece of me that's like frustrated and annoyed about it, because Mastodon very quickly gained this reputation of like it's too hard to understand. And it's really not. Like, you can just go to mastodon.social and then sign up for an account the same way you do with every other platform. And it's really not that hard to figure out. Like, if you can actually figure out how to like change your profile name on Instagram, like you can you can figure out Mastodon. But point being, Mastodon was the only one that was like decentralized, meaning that nobody owned it. Anyone could spin up their own Mastodon server, and you could talk to everybody else who was using Mastodon simultaneously, which meant that like no one person could ruin it the same way Elon Musk could buy Twitter and then start using Twitter. A lot of the people who left Twitter to move to Threads, it's like, is that really better? Is going from Elon Musk to Mark Zuckerberg actually the better option for you? And then Blue Sky, at least at the beginning, had the air of something that could maybe evolve into being better. There is a world in which, you know, they claimed that they had their own protocol that they were building called the AT protocol that was going to allow them to also kind of work like Mastodon and allow you to like, you know, shift between servers and different versions of Blue Sky. And most of that hasn't materialized. As far as I've seen, like most people are still just on the like standard Blue Sky server. Nobody's really leaving and going elsewhere with it, which is, you know, kind of the whole point. And then increasingly, leadership at Blue Sky continues to make decisions that are like pretty bad. Like they're just like actively hostile towards their user base. So we're just seeing the same thing happen again with Blue Sky. Point being, that's the thing. When I was doing research about like Discord alternatives, that was the main thing that was really frustrating me. It was like I couldn't find one that really made sense from that perspective. Like, how do you leave this platform behind and find one that actually solves its problems and isn't just like literally a clone of it? That said, though, the big question I have about Discord doing this in the first place, because people are really upset about it, it's worth mentioning. I saw a stat yesterday that searches for Discord alternative on Google went up 20,000% over the weekend, which, you know, that's notable. Is it the economy of scale needed to, you know, really send a message to Discord? I don't know, but Discord has already felt the need to kind of walk this back a little bit. For example, they have this quote: "For the majority of users, we will be able to confirm your age group using information we already have. We use age prediction to determine with high confidence when a user is an adult. This allows many adults to access age-appropriate features without completing an explicit age check." So not only is Discord making statements trying to walk back this idea that basically proliferated around the internet immediately, which is that like everyone's going to have to upload their government issued ID to be able to access stuff. But now their method of walking that back is being like, we have actually been tracking and aggregating your data so much that we can use an AI to be able to tell if you're an adult or not. And that creates a whole new suite of issues. I find it to be really troubling. I find that to be concerning. And look, I'm not naive. I know that if a product is free, you are the product, et cetera, et cetera. But like, to a certain degree, Discord is not a free product when they are constantly asking people to pay for Nitro subscriptions. And then they have the gall to just like shove ads all over the place and ask you to like do quests inside of your chat app. I don't know, man. Discord has been on this path for a while because they're trying to IPO this year. It's basically public information at this point that they want to IPO at some point this year, which means they're going to be at the whims of shareholders. Basically, never has that gone great for tech companies in terms of just like continuing on a good path. And we're already seeing Discord make like user hostile decisions in the lead up to their IPO. So imagine how much worse it's going to be when they launch at, you know, lower than they expected and want to increase revenue as quickly as possible. That's going to mean like either layoffs within Discord, or that's going to mean, you know, ways of turning on the revenue funnel as high as humanly possible, which is a mess. It's a mess. And this is part of that. This is all part of this. There is also, on top of this, the irony of like, you're saying that you're trying to protect kids in a world where like we all see the Epstein files floating around. That might be a wild thing to juxtapose against one another, but like we're watching people not go to prison, like within these files that the Department of Justice has had for basically a decade at this point. Simultaneously, Discord is like, we need to have a facial recognition software look at your government issued ID to make sure you're not a kid, which essentially bundles and makes very easily to tell who is and who is not a child. Like that actually seems worse in a lot of ways. It seems like the antithesis of what you're trying to do. There are a lot of problems here, and I don't know how you save face without walking this back entirely and finding another way. It's not my job to figure out another way. I don't work at Discord, but like there are definitely other ways of doing this. I am most concerned about two things. Number one is obviously like I'm just not going to upload my ID to Discord. And the fallback here is that they're going to use AI to like scan everything I've ever posted and figure out if I'm an adult or not. And that's also horrible. Like that's also horrifying. I don't want to be party to that either. So where does that leave me? Where does that leave us? Like as a community who uses Discord? I don't know, but I don't understand how Discord thinks it's so secure in its market position. This is the big question I asked. I wrote this on my blog the other day, but like that's the major question I keep coming back to is how does Discord believe they're like totally safe? Discord itself is a clone of another company. Like Discord is Slack, but for gamers. That's all it is. Like Slack started, I think 2 years before Discord, or maybe 1 year, but still like Slack had a full year of starting to gain market growth before Discord even showed up. It's very clear that like Discord is just a gamer clone of Slack. Not only that, but the main group of people who use Discord are like gamers who are more technically inclined than most people would be out in the world, meaning that like, yeah, there's going to be a bunch. I'm sure right now, as I'm recording this and as you're watching or listening to this, there is a group of people in a Discord server probably building a competitor to Discord that they could probably launch like relatively soon if they wanted to. And this is just the way things work. And I think this is more how I'm feeling about this is really born of like, I've just been through this so many times. We've all been through this so many times. This is a thing. Like, for example, if you were a Tumblr person, like I loved Tumblr. I used Tumblr all the time. Some of my best real life friends are people who I met on Tumblr. And then, Tumblr changed hands like 5 or 6 times. And basically everyone bailed because it just got like worse and worse as a platform. Same thing with Facebook even. Like I know it's hard to believe, but there was a time where Facebook, the website, facebook.com was like a website people enjoyed being on. We've just gone through this over and over and over again, and now it's happening with Discord. So like on a certain level, yeah, I'm used to it. I'll find another way of talking to people. Now, on the other hand, like I don't want to give up the fact that we've like kind of staked our claim, planted a flag in the ground on an island separate from the worst parts of the internet. And yeah, we built it on the back of a platform that was like free and like is well within their rights to IPO if they want. But like, oh my God, does all of this always have to come at the cost of like common sense and decency? Like, I don't think there's that far of a line to draw between Discord is demanding you upload your government issued ID to prove that you're an adult and the Super Bowl ad for Ring cameras that showed that all of the Ring cameras in a neighborhood will talk to one another and AI scan every single person who walks by to try to find a lost dog is how they framed it in the Super Bowl ad. But like, 404 Media has a great article about it. That's like, yeah, they've created like an AI dragnet. And obviously that will be used eventually to find like undocumented immigrants in your neighborhood. This was always the fear about Ring cameras. And now here they are advertising it in a Super Bowl ad. It just feels so obvious that like that's the path that this is on. There are many instances And there have been many instances over the past couple of years where you know in your heart of hearts that the right thing to do is to say something or to stand up and just be like, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to do this. This is, against my own personal values. I can see the path that this is on. Just like have a moment of introspection and a little bit of foresight based on everything that you've experienced in your life and everything other people have told you they've experienced in their lives. And just like do the right thing. And so frequently the right thing is so easy to do. Leaving Twitter behind was an easy thing to do, despite how much I loved that website and have built so many friendships and honestly, like a big chunk of this career based on what I did on Twitter between the years of 2007 and 2021 or 22 or whenever we all bailed. I don't even remember when it was anymore. It was essentially easy to leave that website behind. And I feel the same way about like the BDS movement and boycotting Microsoft. Like it's so easy to not play or talk about Microsoft games. Like I am not spending money on Microsoft anymore, so I'm saving money doing the boycott. And then I just don't need to talk about those games, which gives me more avenue and more room to talk about like newer indie stuff that's out there. And I'm feeling that way a little bit about Discord right now, where I'm like, it will be technically easier to not use Discord. I can delete an app off of my phone and I can move somewhere else. I haven't gotten there yet. So if you're one of the people who's part of the community, that's not happening. But like, I am mentally preparing for the possibility that that is a thing that will need to happen, as a way of proving that I will not just kind of stand idly by and allow them to infringe on people's privacy and then eventually leak everybody's information again. I should mention Discord says that all of this stuff is processed locally, which means they're running their own AI on your end of the computer, which is also troubling. But the easiest thing you can do right now is cancel your Nitro subscriptions if you have them. I pay for a bunch because I want our server to have, the most features and the best audio quality and all the stuff that you get from a Nitro subscription to a server that unlocks a bunch of great features. But I'm going to like remove all of those, which, sucks and is a bummer, but I just feel like it's the thing I have to do to make a point right now. So that's what's up with Discord. I'm curious to see, even maybe between, recording this episode and when it comes out, there might be more statements from Discord. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye to the news, I guess. And I'll update people if there's more news that's actually worth talking about there. I'm curious how you all feel about this. Like, I think it's something that feels, easy and innocuous at first. And there can be a sense of like, well, everything is going this way. Just remember that things don't need to go that way. Like you can say something and you can stop using a product and then they don't need to go this way. And by continuing to not use products that go this way, it will send a signal out, I guess I'm just hopeful that like most people feel that way about it, but I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. All right, I'm going to take a break. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about some quicker news. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to talk about the MCON. I should also mention I'm recording this on Wednesday, February 11th. So it's the day before there's a Sony PlayStation event. They have a state of play happening on Thursday night, which I just wasn't going to be able to record an episode and fit all of that into this one. But if you're a patron, I did live stream that event, so you can go watch the VOD of that on Patreon. All right, I'm going to take a break. When I come back, more news. All right, we're back. I have a few kind of quicker news stories that I want to talk about, just to run through them before we talk about the MCON. Number one, I just need to mention that Riot recently laid off 80 members of the 2XKO team 2 weeks after the game launched on consoles. 2XKO, fighting game by Riot. It's a 2v2 fighting game that people generally seem to like a lot. Like the people who play it really, really enjoy it. I know there's some people in our Discord server, who really dig that game and have been playing it a lot. Riot says that basically their launch on console wasn't big enough, and their response to that needed to be laying 80 people off from the team, which I guess my short version of a reaction to this, first of all, obviously, is like my heart goes out to the people who got laid off. That's horrible. And second of all, and this is just how I feel about basically every company that's laying people off, especially ones the size of Riot, is like, you couldn't have done something else with these people. You know, is Riot doing so poorly that they couldn't afford to have 80 more people on staff, like working on one of the other many projects that Riot is working on? This is the thing that I always get frustrated by, is just this idea that like these giant companies, like this is their only option. Like laying people off used to be like a last resort, and now obviously it isn't. In fact, in most cases, it's like the first resort for companies that want to remain profitable. Instead of, you know, making good business decisions and making products that people want, it's like, let's lay off the people who make the products that people want, which is so dumb and short-sighted. And I think, you know, I'm in the middle of reading, oh my God, I can't remember the name of the book because I just, Keza McDonald's Super Nintendo. I'm in the middle of reading. It's a just book about Nintendo and like how Nintendo became what it is. And honestly, like the short version of, you know, the thesis statement of the book, you should read the book, first of all. And I want to talk more about it on some kind of platform when I'm done with the book, because I find it super interesting. But the thesis statement of the book is basically like they don't lay people off. Like if you work at Nintendo, you work at Nintendo for a long time. And that institutional knowledge stays within those walls. And the people who are older, who have worked on like every game since Nintendo was founded, are working with the designers who are making like the newest stuff. And that kind of commingling of different age groups and different levels of experience is how they're able to pass on that institutional knowledge over time. And I'm not the first person to say that the video game industry is having an issue with institutional knowledge due to layoffs, but like you see something like this happen at Riot, and it's like, Riot's a big company. They can afford these people. What are you doing, man? Happier news to swap over. I should mention, I'm a big fan of The Binding of Isaac. I love that game. I have played probably like over 1,000 hours of it. I don't even need to say probably. I've played over 1,000 hours of The Binding of Isaac between all the platforms I used to play it on. I used to play the Flash version before Rebirth came out, and then I played a ton of it on the PlayStation Vita, and then later on PC, and again on basically every platform. I've played The Binding of Isaac a ton on every platform. And for the past, I don't even know how many years it's been. I think it's been development for 7 years, but I think we've been hearing about it for like 10 at least. Edmund McMillan, the designer behind The Binding of Isaac and also Super Meat Boy, and just like a big like Newgrounds guy, has been talking about a new game called Mewgenics, which is a game, like a roguelike game that involves cats and like breeding cats. And it's been in the works for 7 years. Came out the other day, and within the first 3 hours, Mewgenics made back its entire budget. They confirmed that it sold over 150,000 copies in the first 3 hours. When I checked on Steam, which I want to be clear, this is not a thing I do very often, but I was just curious. On Steam, it had over 60,000 concurrents, like when I first saw that piece of news, which I think is pretty impressive for, you know, a new indie game, especially one that, like, I'll be honest, I didn't see a lot of people very excited about the upcoming release of Mewgenics. I thought that I was just like a weird sicko who was excited about it, but it turns out a lot of people were really excited about it, and it's also kind of, you know, the word is getting out that it's good. So a lot of people are picking it up, and I imagine, you know, even since, you know, seeing this news, it's probably done a lot better, and probably, you know, between me recording this and you hearing this or seeing this, probably has done even better. Mewgenics is, I think, a fantastic video game. I really wish it wasn't called that. I think especially in the current political climate. I also understand, and when I streamed this game the other day, I had a lot of people in my comments being like, I think the art is just too off-putting for me to enjoy this game, and I totally get where you're coming from. I have always felt that way about The Binding of Isaac as well. I've always found that game to be hard to recommend to people because, you know, Edmund McMillan has like a very specific art style that is born of like edgy Newgrounds gross humor, and The Binding of Isaac is like all that all the time, and it has made, I think, people who would love that game, turn tail and run, which I totally get. That having been said, Mewgenics is also that. It has that same art style. It is, pretty brutal, pretty gross. It is also, I will say, a really well designed video game, which is, I think, the thing at the core of it that I'm interested in. Because I will be honest, and I said this on stream the other day, I didn't really follow the development. I just kind of heard it was coming and was like, one day when this is out, I will play it if it ever comes out. And boy, did it come out. And I finally got to figure out what the game was live in front of people, which was fun. And it turns out that it's basically a roguelike tactics game in the style of like an XCOM or an Into the Breach or even a Fire Emblem to a certain degree. Less Fire Emblem outside of maybe the breeding, I guess. But you are essentially taking 4 cats on an adventure where you need to fight like other cats and rats and bugs and stuff in these big grid-based battle arenas, and all of your cats have different abilities. So some of them will just like swipe with their paws, but some of them will like, spit. And some of them are just like magical or have, bows and arrows and stuff. It gets very silly. And like Binding of Isaac, it also very quickly kind of goes off the rails in terms of the abilities and the synergies that you're getting. All of these cats have like different passive and active abilities, and they'll start to synergize with one another, especially as they level up. Like you'll start to run into situations where like, oh wow, this cat does like extra burn damage whenever it burns, and now I'm getting this ability that like lights the square in front of it on fire when the turn ends or something. So that stuff is interesting. And then when you're done with a run and you take all your cats back home, and you like press the end day button, the cats like get it on in the house and then start to produce kittens who then have, different pieces of the traits of all the other cats that are in your house. Which, there's something like gross and disturbing about that, which I totally get. I like if you're hearing all this and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to play that game, like that's totally fair. But if you're like, I think I could probably put up with it and I'd be interested in seeing the game design behind it, you'll probably have a good time because it is an extremely in-depth, well-put-together game. I saw Edmund himself say something to the effect of like, if you want to beat this game, it'll take somewhere in the realm of like 500 to 600 hours, which I don't know. Sign me up, probably. Like I've already enjoyed what I've played enough. I think my only thing is I kind of wish it was on another platform. Right now it's only on PC, but I would love to see this like on mobile or iPad or Switch or something. But I know that they said they're going to see how it does on PC first and then think about ports, which makes sense. It's doing pretty well. So I'm imagining we'll get some ports eventually. But stay tuned. I would say tune in probably to Into the Aether if you want to hear more about my thoughts on Mewgenics as I play more of it. I've only played it for about 3 hours so far. So I want to dump some more time into it before I bring it to that show and talk about it for real. I had a moment while I was playing it for the first time where I was like, should I do a review of this game? But I just think there's too much. I just think there's too much of a game for me to actually like do a real review of. But who knows? Hey, whatever. Last quick story before I take another break that I want to talk about. I just need to talk about Yakuza Kiwami 3 real quick. So if you don't know anything about the Yakuza games, I'll make it very, very brief. Yakuza, it's been around for a while by a studio called RGG within Sega. They started on the PS2 with Yakuza, and then eventually have made their way all the way to Yakuza 8, which is actually called Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. The protagonist, Kiryu, was the protagonist from 1 through 6. And then with 7, which was Yakuza Like a Dragon, they introduced a new protagonist named Ichiban, who then was also the protagonist of 8. At a certain point, while developing all these games across all these different platforms, RGG decided we are going to make a prequel to the series as a new on-ramp for people who maybe haven't played the franchise before and want to get into Yakuza. And if you're anything like me and you've been hearing for years and years and years, like Yakuza is one of the best franchises out there, and there's a lot of them, and you can play all of them, and they're all going to be great, then that's an exciting prospect, the idea that there is this like new on-ramp that they're building. So they made a game called Yakuza 0, takes place in the 80s. It's a prequel to all the other ones. And I remember starting that game initially and being like, there is stuff that I'm not understanding, or moments that the game thinks I should be excited about, but I'm not, because I don't know who these characters are. And the game is kind of implying that I should already know who a lot of these people are, which I found very strange, I'll say. So I ended up actually going and playing Yakuza Kiwami 1. Now, what is Yakuza Kiwami 1? Yakuza Kiwami 1, or Yakuza Kiwami, I guess is the actual name. Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the first Yakuza game that takes bits and pieces of the story involved from Yakuza 0 and weaves those story bits into the original story of Yakuza 1. It introduces some new story ideas, takes some things in some different directions, but it's largely the same game, just in a new engine, more palatable for new players. And it's really great. It's pretty short. It's the shortest one, I think, probably between like 20 and 30 hours max, maybe. And I loved like every single minute of my time with Yakuza Kiwami. I thought it was like truly one of the more exceptional games I've ever played. And that really empowered me to go seek out the rest of the franchise. It's worth mentioning there's a bunch of spin-offs, Judgment and Lost Judgment, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. There's a lot of stuff in the Yakuza universe, but I'm mainly talking about like the mainline games. So after Yakuza Kiwami, they made Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is similarly a remake of the second game that continues, again, the lineage of the story from 0 into 1 and 2. And the thing about Yakuza 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2 is that they very cleanly led into a package that RGG had made years ago that started with Yakuza 3 Remastered. That allowed you to just kind of like transition from one game into the other. And then when you were done with Kiwami 2, you could go into Yakuza 3 Remastered and have like generally a pretty seamless experience. Like, yes, that game felt a little bit more sluggish and weird than the more recent Yakuza Kiwami 2 would, but you know, you'd still be set up to enjoy the story and have a good time. What they decided to do was make Yakuza Kiwami 3, which, just like Kiwami 1 and 2, is a remake of the game. And they immediately were in hot water because they announced the voice cast for this game. And one of the main characters of Yakuza Kiwami 3 is played by a guy who is like a noted sex offender and just like creep. People were rightfully upset about this. And I think there's two things worth mentioning about this. Number one is just the obvious that, like, why are you still, you know, it's like when they cast Jared Leto and stuff. It's like, what are we doing, man? Why is Jared Leto the star of your new Tron movie? You know, why is he playing, what's his name? The Skull guy in the new He-Man. I just forgot that dude's name. I think his name like is Skull. Oh, I can't remember that guy's name in He-Man. Anyway, Jared Leto keeps getting work. This guy keeps getting work. Why are you doing that? It's one thing. The other side of it, and this is the part that I think is the most important to note, is that the Yakuza franchise, over years and over time, has always been kind of equated by people who mostly haven't played them as like Japan's Grand Theft Auto. That's always the way it's been seen to people, is like, oh yeah, you know, you're playing as a member of the Yakuza, therefore it must be like Grand Theft Auto, but in Japan. And you really couldn't be further from the truth in that case. The Yakuza franchise, if you haven't played it, is basically soap opera melodrama explorations of essentially toxic masculinity within organized crime, obviously, but just like in general in Japanese society and in society writ large. Like the ways in which the Yakuza franchise is able to deconstruct the idea of what masculinity is and can look like, I think is really fascinating. And a lot of that comes packaged and bundled up with ideas of feminism, ideas of like, you know, trans existence at all, and queer existence, and like the right for LGBTQIA plus people to exist like out in society, which, you know, is a pretty radical thing in Japanese society and increasingly globally, it seems. You know, we're in a wave where that's also increasingly radical. Basically, for this game to have a noted sex offender become one of the faces of the video game makes a lot of people rightfully feel like unsafe and horrible about playing this game, and they don't want to support it, which I think is totally fair and makes a lot of sense. That's, I think, the most important part here is kind of a flip on kind of the like underpinning themes of the franchise, making people go from this video game series is a place where I feel like seen and powerful to this is a thing. Well, basically, that's just the opposite of that. I just want to make that very clear. That's the most important thing, because everything else I'm about to talk about is not as important as that first thing. But the follow-up here also is that they also have changed the story pretty dramatically. Number one, actually, is removing a side story about a trans woman, which is, frustrating and wrong. There were something like 120 side stories in the game, and I think there's 90-ish, like somewhere between 80 and 90 now. And one of the ones that they cut was one about a trans woman, alongside like other stuff that people seem to love. Like I haven't played Yakuza 3, so I don't know the answer to this, but there's one called Cafe Alps that people really loved that is now gone as well, inexplicably. Like it was like the fan favorite that they just removed. They also changed the story pretty dramatically, from what I understand. I haven't looked this up, but I probably should. I haven't looked it up for spoiler reasons, but I probably won't play this game, so whatever. They've changed the story so dramatically that it seems like you can't go from playing Yakuza Kiwami 3 to playing Yakuza 4 anymore, which then raises a question. Are they going to make a Yakuza Kiwami 4? No, is the answer, according to RGG, in an interview that they gave this week. What they're instead going to do is continue the story from Yakuza Kiwami 3 onwards. So let's just recap. Yakuza comes out. They get all the way through, I think, Yakuza 6, and then go back and make Yakuza 0 and Kiwami 2 as a way to onboard people into being able to play the franchise and get Kiryu's story before the story gets handed over to Ichiban in Yakuza 7. That makes sense. That's pretty clean. They then release Yakuza Kiwami 3 and say this is starting a new story, or this is the continuation of a new story, continuing to star Kiryu, that is now going to be an alternate timeline from what we already had. So what does that mean for Yakuza's 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? And The Man Who Erased His Name and all the other spin-offs that include all this other stuff based on that continuity. We now have a new continuity for Yakuza. We've now made the franchise more confusing instead of easier and cleaner to get into. What are you thinking, man? Like, what are you talking about? That's such a silly thing to do. I can't, like, I find it so baffling that that's the decision that they've made. Not only are people like, well, this is fresh, like from what I've seen, at least, I spend a good amount of time in like hardcore Yakuza fandom communities, and everyone is basically like, I'm out. Like, Yakuza's over. Like, I just, there's no way that this is going in the right direction. Honestly, now I'm thinking about it, it feels very similar to the Discord situation, which is like, it's just clearly visibly getting worse, and there's only one direction it can go, which is continuing to go down, which is sad. It's a sad thing, especially considering what a revered franchise Yakuza is and has been for such a long time. There's this one quote from the VGC review of Yakuza Kiwami 3 that I need to mention. Just like as a video game and as a remake, Yakuza Kiwami 3 is a remake built on disdain, not reverence, looking to fix a game that wasn't broken and ending up with little to show for itself. I just think that's such an incisive quote, which I really love. Because it really, I think, underpins the fact that this is the worst possible way to do a remake. Definitely coupled with, and this is maybe the most important bit, they have removed Yakuza 3 Remastered from sale. And now the only version of this that you can buy is Yakuza Kiwami 3. So you get this inferior version with a worse story that people like less, that removes content, and in some cases also looks worse visually. And if you know me and you know anything about me, I'm not a person who usually cares about this kind of stuff, but oh my God, looking at some of the side-by-sides between the original Yakuza 3 or Yakuza 3 Remastered, and Yakuza Kiwami 3 is like shocking how bad some things look. Even if it plays better, like just, I mean, it's been so long. It's, oh my God. So you're removing the original from sale and making this the only version that people can buy, and then you're changing so much of it that it no longer ties into the rest of the franchise. It just raises a lot of questions about like the direction of the studio in general. And look, RGG has other things that they're working on that are like exciting and interesting. Stranger Than Heaven is a cool idea if you haven't seen that trailer. But I'm dubious about Yakuza and the future of this. It's worth mentioning that the original creator of Yakuza left the studio years ago and made his own studio, which is working on a game called Gang of Dragon, which was shown off at the Game Awards last year in December, which was the trailer from the Game Awards that I still to this day I'm excited about that video game. So fingers crossed, you know, if we can't get a Discord replacement, maybe we can get a Yakuza replacement. All right, I'm going to take one more break. When I come back, I'm going to talk about the MCON. Bye-bye. All right, welcome back. I'm talking about the MCON. If you don't know about the MCON is a mobile controller that is honestly being heavily advertised everywhere, so I'm pretty sure you have seen or heard of it. If you're only listening to this podcast episode and you're not watching it on YouTube, I'm gonna make a sound into the microphone right now, which is gonna be shocking. But it is the sound of the controller opening up. I'm going to press this button on the top. That's the sound of the controller opening up. So if you're looking at it, it's basically, when closed, kind of a phone-sized rectangle with like an interesting oval on the top, which is a MagSafe plateau that allows you to connect your phone to the top of the controller, and then you press a button on top, and it flips up like a T-Mobile Sidekick. Or, more notably, a PSP Go, and reveals beneath it a pretty solid set of face buttons and a D-pad and some analog sticks. And there's a USB-C port for charging at the bottom. On the top, there are shoulder buttons, L1 and R1 and L2 and R2, along with a little switch for turning the thing on and off, and a pairing button for Bluetooth. And on the back, which is, I think, one of the more interesting ideas, are these little wings that you can flip out that become hand grips that make it more comfortable to hold. All of this is pretty cool, just like as an idea. It's also worth mentioning there's a button on the inside as well. That's it looks like an eject button, and when you press it, it allows you to take the MagSafe bit off the top. Which is fun, and then you can just use the MCON controller by itself as like a Bluetooth controller or a PC controller for PC or for Switch or whatever, and then the little sliding mechanism that has the plateau on it also flips out like a kickstand, which allows you to just put your phone on or like in kickstand mode. Okay, so that's what this thing does. Let's start there. I've been excited about this for a long while. This was first not even announced, but just like shown in a Reddit post in, I think, 2022 or 2023. The kid, Josh King, who basically invented the MCON, just built a prototype for himself in his room and was like, I've always wanted something like this, so I just made it myself. And people obviously went nuts for it. I even wrote a blog post about it on Wavelengths, like when this happened, being like, this will never exist, but I hope somebody takes this idea and runs with it because I would like one. Because I have loved the idea of the PSP Go for a long time. This is before I owned a PSP Go. I now have two of them, but I just think the idea of making your console smaller by having it, fold up in interesting ways, beyond just being a clamshell, but having literally like a sliding mechanism, just made a lot of sense for like portability. And I think the era that we're in of mobile controllers, where most of them are like the backbone, they're like these telescopic controllers that wrap around the side of your phone, that's just not portable. If you want to use your phone as a gaming device, as your like primary gaming device, you can't really be bringing the backbone around with you everywhere unless you are also bringing a bag with you, which not everybody is. A lot of people are, but not everybody is. And not everybody wants to use their bag space to put something like the backbone in there, which, I think raises questions about like what can be the future of mobile controllers. How do you find a form factor that best fits the way phones are built right now, which is like every single one is just a black rectangle. Except for obviously the interesting folding ones, but like most phones are just black rectangles. So how do you build a mobile controller that fits them? It's worth mentioning also, yes, there is MagSafe on the back, but there is also an included ring that you get that you can put on the back of an Android phone, so you can MagSafe on Android as well. Anyway, all of that leads me to the MCON again, which is like, this to me, when I first saw it, felt like the correct form factor. Because as a person who, I have another podcast that I do called Next Portable Console. I do it every week. You can find the YouTube channel if you want to watch that as well. And it's a show all about handheld gaming and different devices that we use for handheld gaming. And I'm a person who, generally speaking, always has some kind of way of playing video games on him at all times. Like whenever I leave the house, if I have a bag or I don't have a bag, usually like in one pocket, there is some kind of gaming device that I'm bringing with me. Never really has that been a telescopic controller like the backbone. Usually that is a dedicated gaming device, something like, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen the AYN Thor, or, the Retroid Pocket or things like that. The Trim UI Brick, the Miu Mini, there are all of these devices out there that are fantastic and small and portable and great for playing, and emulating retro games and older games and things like that. But as a person who was already doing that, the question for me was, if I get a controller that also fits in my pocket, like I could leave the house without a bag and have this with me, could this hypothetically just replace the need for having a retro emulation handheld in my pocket instead? Like, at the end of the day, things like the Miu Mini and the Trim UI Brick are fantastic. The Miu Flip actually is the one that I usually bring with me used to bring with me whenever I left the house. The thing is, though, my iPhone, I have the iPhone Air, which is a phone that I despise, but I have. The iPhone Air still has a better battery than the Miu Flip, a better screen, and a better processor, and can play more things better than the Miu Flip and most other low-end handhelds that are out there. Which really just equates to the pocketable ones, like the ones that actually fit in your pocket. My iPhone is better than all of them. So if I can replace the thing in my pocket with a controller that allows me to use my iPhone natively as an emulation device or a gaming device, then that is worth it to me. That's an interesting idea. So I reached out to OSnap, which is the company that picked up Josh and was like, we're going to manufacture the MCON. And I said, would you be interested in sending me one of these? It turns out that Josh was a fan of the channel. Hello, Josh, if you're watching. And was gracious enough to hop on a call with me. We talked about the MCON a bit. We talked about his plans for the MCON and what they wanted to do and, future ideas, which I'll talk about. And all of this stuff, which led me down this path of like, I'm really excited for this. I think this has the potential to be a really big deal. And they sent me one, which is very nice. They sent me one really early. They sent me one in October. This was like months before they were sending them out to most reviewers. As far as I'm aware, the only few people who got them early were me, Russ at Retro Game Core, and I think Linus from Linus Tech Tips, which is wild for me to be included in that trifecta. We were the only 3 people who got them initially. And I started using it and liked it immediately. Like I was a pretty big fan of it. I thought it did solve a lot of the problems that I found from other mobile controllers. I will say this about it at first. I love the D-pad. I love the face buttons. I love the shoulder buttons. I think the analog sticks I initially thought were not going to be great, and it turns out are great. It's worth mentioning that I was also playing a lot of Silksong with the MCON using my phone for game streaming, which was very interesting. I learned very quickly, because I have an Android phone that I use for testing, that if you have an Android phone, if you pair it with the MCON, it's like the dream, because iOS has emulators on it, but Android, is open and it's better for playing stuff like GameCube and PS2, things that won't run on your iPhone. Even if you sideload those apps on, they won't run very well. And it's not as easy to get that stuff running, I guess is kind of the main point. I know people do it, but I don't want to jump through those hoops. Point being, the Android experience with the MCON is amazing, but even still, like, I use Delta a lot on my iPhone for emulating games, and I just found the experience to be like largely fantastic. And pushing into things like game streaming, I was really surprised by, because I didn't really expect myself to get super into that part of it. But I found myself doing a lot of game streaming as well, kind of coincided with me getting a PC as well. So being able to game stream from my PC to my phone was great. Playing a lot of Persona 4 Golden with the MCON on my phone has been great. I was pretty impressed by it. Around this time is when the final price was announced, which is $120. I'm going to double check that just to make sure. Oh, sorry. It's $150, which is even more than I thought. So, okay. The final price. Oh, yeah, right. It was $120, I think, initially, if you pre-ordered it. And now that it's out, it's $150. So it's worth mentioning also that there was a Kickstarter where you could get it for, I think it was $80 or $100. It was, much cheaper than $150, which I did back. This is before they even sent me one. I backed the Kickstarter because they had a transparent Kickstarter exclusive edition, which I was interested in picking up. All of that said, I started using this, and, I'm by all measures, a small YouTube creator. And getting access to something as hyped up as the MCON early made me think, like, I need to use this for a week, 2 weeks, and get a review out before, Snap sends it to more people or whatever. I just, there's the content brain part of me that's like, I need to get this review out. And I sat down. This is not a joke. I have sat down 4 different times to record a review of the MCON. In every single instance, I sat down and I talked at length for like over an hour about it, and never really felt like I could actually articulate what I thought about it. And I also found that my opinion of it kept evolving and changing every single time I sat down to talk about it. So here's the most concise way I can put this. And again, keep in mind that they sent me one. I want to make that very clear. This is not a paid promotion or anything, but they did send me a unit early. I think the MCON is the best mobile controller I have ever used in my life. I think it will be hard for any other mobile controller to beat this in terms of its portability, and I just even think its build quality and the ways in which it fits into my life. In that first review period, I brought it with me every day for 2 weeks. I did some traveling even in those 2 weeks, and I didn't bring any other gaming devices with me. I just brought the MCON. I was like, I'm going to commit to only using my phone. And I remember there was this one moment, I was in Washington, D.C. I was with my brother-in-law, and we were picking up breakfast burritos at this one place, and we went and ordered them, and they were like, it's going to take, 15 minutes to get these ready. And my brother-in-law had to leave because he was going to a different cafe to pick up some coffees for people. So it was just like me waiting for the food. And in that moment, I immediately had this like, oh yeah, I could bust out the MCON. And I pulled it out of my pocket, slapped it on. A very cool thing about the MCON that's worth mentioning. So there's an on-off switch on it. You can always leave it on if you want, actually, because it won't actually turn on until you flip it up, until you press the button and turn it on. And then actually, if you're watching, you can see it's connecting right now to my phone. Which is very cool. So I just, slapped my phone on here, flipped it open, and started playing. I forget what I was. Oh, I was playing Mario Kart at the time. I was playing Mario Kart DS, and played, a couple races real quick. And then the guy called my number for our breakfast burritos, and I, closed this up, put it back in my pocket, grabbed the burritos, was on my way. And that experience of like, oh yeah, that fit so unbelievably seamlessly into my life, even quicker to get into a game than if I had my Miyoo Flip with me, which again is the device I was mainly using. The Miyoo Flip like takes a while to turn on and then to load into games, and you're going through all this stuff. Like the speed at which I could pull this out of my pocket, slap my phone on here, open up Delta while that's happening, and then start playing a game was pretty wild. I have been impressed by it on that front over and over and over and over again. And I was curious after that first time I sat down to do a review, I was like, will I like this thing even more? Like, I forced myself to bring it with me every day for 2 weeks for this review period. But what is it like if I just continue using it? So the second time I sat down to do a review was about a month and a half in. And I felt exactly the same way. Every time I left the house, the MCON came with me. And sometimes I would bring something else with me, but usually I was playing with the MCON. The third time I sat down to do a review was, I think, 3 months in, because I was like, oh, I'll do a video that's like 3 months of the MCON. And still was like, I love this thing. And at that point, and this is what was interesting, this is when people started getting their shipping notifications because it was starting to come out. And I think a lot of people had already turned on the company a little bit because of the price. I think the $150 price really turned a lot of people off. And I think that makes sense because, at $150, this is a pretty expensive thing to be buying when you could buy a dedicated retro handheld for basically the same price or less, that is, a smaller form factor and would be easier to bring with you. All of that said, at CES in January, OSnap showed up again, and they showed off 2 new versions of the MCON that they're working on, the MCON Slim and the MCON Lite. And they are basically what they say on the tin, thinner versions of the MCON. Imagine basically half of this thickness is what they're going for. And there's 2 different versions. One of them has, when you flip it up, circle pads, like from the 3DS, like circle pads instead of full analog sticks, and does not flip out. It doesn't have these like back grips that flip out for better handheld support. And then the other one is even thinner and uses like capacitive divots for your thumbs. They don't even have like physical analog sticks to use. You're just kind of using these capacitive divots. And both of these are much thinner than the original MCON, which I think is going to be eventually called the MCON Pro, if I'm understanding correctly. And this was also at a time where a lot of people were not getting their MCON. Their MCONs were not showing up, or they had been shipped, or they were behind on shipping. A lot of people are still waiting for their MCONs to arrive, and they've not gotten them. So I think seeing that the price is now $150, seeing that they are announcing 2, maybe depending on your needs, better versions of the MCON, puts a bad taste in your mouth, which I totally understand. So why am I doing this review now? I think the main reason is that I'm just in this kind of interesting spot where I was sent one early. I was sent a pre-production unit. I have been using it for 5 months. And what I have found is that this is not just like a fad or like a weird quirk and device that I just happen to own. I have, if you're watching, I'll lift this up. I have a big bag literally packed to the brim with handhelds. Like, handhelds are spilling out of this bag. I review and talk about a lot of handhelds on my podcasts and on this channel in like short form videos and stuff. And I write about them on my blog. And the main question I'm always asking myself is like, does this replace something for me? Does this actually fit into my life? I don't want to be a person who's buying handhelds all the time. I don't, there's even the e-waste of it all. Like I want to find something that fits into my life. And the way that I've always talked about it is like, I have 3 devices, one really low end one kind of medium end one, and then one like really high end one. So the high end one for me right now is the ROG Ally X, not the Xbox version, to be clear, which I wiped Windows off of and put SteamOS on, which I love dearly. That's my high end handheld. Then there is the AYN Thor, which is my kind of medium tier one. And then I have my low end one, which was the Miyoo Flip, and is now my iPhone, basically. And that's the thing that's surprised me is like, yes, the MCON has become my go-to handheld for everyday use. It's the thing that comes with me whenever I leave the house. I think that's interesting. The second thing is that I did get my Kickstarter version. I have the transparent Kickstarter exclusive one with the silver faceplate and stuff. And I've used this a bit as well. I took this on a trip. I was in Paris a couple weeks ago. I was with my wife because she was covering Paris Fashion Week. So I was there as her videographer. And I brought the MCON with me. I only brought two things with me. I brought the ROG Ally X and I brought the MCON. I spent most of my time playing on the MCON. I will say one thing about the Kickstarter exclusive version, if you are upset that you missed it. I don't like this one as much as I like the black one. The Kickstarter exclusive one specifically, the power switch on it is really fiddly and loose in a way that the black one is not. It's like really pretty solid. Like if I flip it on and off, it stays on or off. And I found multiple times as I was like walking around Paris, sometimes my phone would just like show the you connected to a controller icon, even if it was closed and I thought I had the power switch off, it would like switch on and then connect somehow, which the other one doesn't do. The black one never did that. So I will say that much. But point B, actually, look, I just saw I was just trying to connect right now. It's off, but it's flashing. Like as I'm recording this. Oh, wait, it just stopped flashing. This is what I'm talking about. I have no idea what's going on with this thing. Oh, actually, when I shake it, it flashes. What's up with that? Now it's totally connecting. But it's in the off position. What is happening? Anyway, great shout out to this specific MCON model for proving my point for me while I'm recording a podcast about it. All of this leads to the $150 price point, which it's just too much. Truly, it's just I just think it's too much. It's too much money to ask for this thing. I think it's worth acknowledging that this does feel like the most premium mobile controller I have used, like even compared to the Backbone 1 and, you know, the Galileo G8 and all. I've tried a lot of them. Trust me when I say I've tried a lot of them. This is the best feeling one of all of them by a pretty huge margin. But I just think at $150, I would probably point people in other directions for other ways of, you know, whatever they want to be doing with this, they could probably do with something else for cheaper. And then also knowing that the Slim and Light are on the horizon, like maybe they'll get the pricing right on those and those will be cheaper and better for most people. I don't think you need the full analog sticks to get the same experience. I think the circle pads might actually be enough. And if it gets it thin enough, and this is the dream for me in particular, if it gets it thin enough that I can attach it to the back of my phone and not need to take it off. Like right now, this occupies another pocket for me. But if this could go on the back of my phone and I never needed to take it off, that's interesting. That's where you get to what I think is like the dream of what the MCON can be. And that's what's exciting, I think, about the potential future of those two devices. But for a lot of people, I think rightfully they feel burned. And I think it's going to take a lot for them to come around on the idea of MCON. I'm in a very lucky, and I acknowledge this, and privileged position to have had one sent to me and then to have also pre-ordered one on Kickstarter early enough to like now have two of them. But even backing it on Kickstarter, I got it for the Kickstarter price, which I think was significantly more reasonable than it is at $150. But even in that situation, I have to acknowledge that, like, as a person recording a podcast, giving you an opinion, and you may be asking the question, should I buy an MCON? Like, I don't think it's worth it for $150. But I do think if you do get one, at least in my opinion and in my experience, having used one for 5 months now, it is my go-to. It is my favorite controller that I use on my phone. It has made me replace the idea of like a second retro handheld in my pocket, which I think is interesting because I really didn't think it was going to get there. And all of that raises the biggest question for me, which is like, do I even want that? Is that an ideal end goal here? It's a question I've been asking myself a lot recently, and it's one that I will probably explore either via a or multiple like YouTube videos or blog posts or something, but I've been going through this kind of experimental phase over the past couple months of like moving away from using my phone for everything. It kind of started with like music in particular. I was trying to figure out like a better way of kind of, listening to music that felt better to me, which has led me down the path of like MP3 players and building up an MP3 library again, and like trading music with my friends and all this stuff. I now have like a music server in my house that I set up that my wife and I can access. And I have a Microsoft Zune that I use, like an old one that I bought off eBay to listen to music when I'm like out and walking around. I have a secondary device that I use for like reading books and stuff. I don't know. I'm just I'm in this phase of like, do I want to be using my phone for everything? How can I kind of remove myself from my phone as much as possible? And there is something to be said for the fact that while the MCON is the best way of playing games on my phone, maybe I shouldn't be playing games on my phone. Maybe I should have a second dedicated device for that. You're seeing a lot with like the generation below me moving to like digicams instead of taking photos with their phones. It's not like a new phenomenon or new idea, but as I've been exploring it, I've been like, going kind of to the extremes and walking back to where it feels comfortable. And even with all of that, I have found that the MCON is just like, in my opinion, such a solid product that I want to be using it all the time. Like I genuinely love using it. And the use case that I use it for, more so than anything these days, is PSP. I made a video last year that was like, what is the best way to play PSP in 2025? And I tried basically every way you could do that, which was fun. It was a fun testing period. But now playing PSP games on my iPhone using MCON as the controller, oh my God, it's the dream, dude. I love it so much. And this is coming from somebody who spent the past year playing all the great PSP games for an episode of Into the Aether. Like, we spent so much time playing the PSP last year, and I used, the original PSP model and 2 different PSP Go models and different emulation handhelds I got a PlayStation TV literally and plugged that into my television and played PSP games that way. Like, I've played PSP games basically every way you possibly can. And my favorite way by far, no question, is on my iPhone with the MCON specifically. I could use my iPhone with the Backbone controller and that would be fine, but it's pales in comparison to the experience of like, I am flipping up the screen and then jumping into Ridge Racer 2 while I'm on the subway. It's the best PSP experience, in my opinion. Those are my thoughts about the MCON. And those are all the things I want to talk about today in this episode of the show. Wow, did I talk a lot? And, funnily enough, and ironically enough, I got a new handheld. I'll show this off right at the end for the people who are here. Like literally right before I started recording, I got this in the mail. It's the Anbernic RGDS. I'll unbox it while I'm on stream. While I'm recording myself. I got it in white, which I just thought looked so clean. Here it is. It is a dual screen handheld, basically only for playing Nintendo DS games. Well, Nintendo DS and then other consoles, but you're not playing 3DS on here really at all. Let me tell you something. Even just opening it up for the first time, it is beautiful. Oh my God. It's really pretty. I'm surprised by it. It got really mixed reviews when it came out, but people have kind of turned around on it. Anyway, expect me to explore that and talk about that elsewhere. But for now, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world, especially if you made it to the end. Maybe consider going to patreon.com/wavelengths and backing the project. And you're going to get a bunch of extra stuff there. I posted a signal check for Monster Hunter Stories 3, which was fantastic and honestly incredible experience with that game. I'm really excited for the full release to come out. And I think the other one that should be up by now as well is Neo 3, the other 3. I really, really dug my time with Neo 3, which has a great character creator that allowed me to create a Waluigi. So you can check those out at the Patreon alongside all the other streams I'm doing. I will also mention that it looks like the time that I will be streaming weekly is Tuesdays from 11 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern, at the very least. Sometimes longer, but that's the plan right now. Is that will be the time that I'm streaming every single week, which I may ramp up over time as I figure out my schedule. I've been working pretty hard recently to figure out what is like the ideal schedule for me on a daily basis. I'm a person who is just toe to tip riddled with ADHD. It's hard to keep a path, but that's also why I'm recording this on Wednesday instead of Thursday, because I just made the most sense to me to record this on Wednesdays from now on. So all that said, you can find me on the internet everywhere. Go to Wavelengths online. That's my hub for everything. I'll catch you later, everybody. Bye-bye.